Israel's Supreme Court on Monday narrowly struck down a law in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's sweeping, and wildly controversial, judicial reforms that sought to limit the court's check on Israel's ruling government, a major blow to Netanyahu, whose critics, both within Israel and outside it, have grown as he has led Israel's war in Gaza following Hamas's shock attack on October 7. Some of those concerns came from the Supreme Court itself, including from Esther Hayut, the court's former president, who asked during arguments in September if the court were barred from using the reasonable standard, then, who ensures that they do indeed act reasonably? Hayut retired from the court in October. Netanyahu's reforms also faced many international critics, including President Joe Biden, who called them undemocratic, and within Israel, his Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant has also chastised the reforms, while Benny Gantz, the leader of Israel's National Unity Opposition Party, led protests against the plan last year. Biden criticized the measure last March, telling reporters he hopes Netanyahu walks away from the reform package, and told the New York Times that building consensus for fundamental changes is really important to ensure that the people buy into them so they can be sustained. Netanyahu struck back at Biden, saying Israel, a longtime ally of the U.S., is a sovereign country which makes its decisions by the will of its people and not based on pressures from abroad. Under the reasonableness standard, the court had been able to deem a law passed by Parliament as unreasonable, if the court determined it was passed without consideration for all relevant factors, a standard Netanyahu argued was too vague and subjective. Netanyahu and his far-right ruling coalition vowed to implement the judicial reforms after Netanyahu regained power in late 2022. Those reforms included a set of 5 changes to the country's judicial system that effectively weakened the country's high court and eliminated judicial checks on the country's ruling party. The reforms, which would cut the court's ability to conduct judicial review over laws and give the Prime Minister more control in appointing justices to the bench, were met with heavy pushback from political opponents and some members of the Israel Defense Forces, including a group of 37 Israeli Air Force Reserve pilots who threatened in March to not participate in military training. In July, Israel's government passed the Reasonableness Bill, the first part of Netanyahu's reform, curbing the court's ability to overturn government decisions it determined were extremely unreasonable. Netanyahu, who regained his position as prime minister after leading the country for 15 years over 2 separate stints between 1996 and 2021, also faces charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust.